Foundation. The motion is set forth in the proxy statement. The motion requests that the company divest of its holdings in companies involved in the extracting, processing, or burning of fossil fuels. The directors have recommended that the shareholders vote against the proposal. I will now recognize Mark Vecina to present the motion. And again, to allow all interested shareholders to present their views, I asked him to limit his remarks to 5 minutes. And the microphone zone 1 is available for those wishing to speak for or against the motion. Zone 1 is the only microphone station in operation, and for the benefit of those present, subsequent speakers, I ask that they limit themselves to 2 minutes and confine your remarks solely to the motion. With that, if you'll proceed.
Thank you. My name is Mark Vecina. I represent the Nebraska Peace Foundation. We're here to present our proposal asking Berkshire Hathaway to divest of its carbon-based assets over a period of 12 years. A period of time we believe is a very modest proposal indeed. Last year we were here with a proposal that Berkshire Hathaway evaluate and report on the impact of climate change on their insurance companies. After the meeting, we were approached by a number of shareholders who suggested we were pulling our punches, and they suggested the real question is divestiture. So we thought about it. We came back to ask for divestiture of the carbon-based assets. We recognize that for a public company that's involved in investing in other companies, divestiture represents different kinds of challenges from those of university endowments, pension plans, public foundations such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, organizations which have divested or have implemented divestiture plans. However, we believe that the necessity for divestiture involves more than just a social or ethical or even moral question, but also involves financial risk, as the Bank of England, in their recommendation to the insurance companies that they regulated, that they investigate and report on the climate change risk to these companies, they pointed out that financial risk of holding these carbon-based assets was real, unpredictable. Things like regulatory risk, political risk, technology changes, investor sentiment changes. These things pose risks towards the financial value of assets in this type of investment. So we are proposing, as I said, divestiture of all carbon-based assets over 12 years. I'm going to be followed by 3 prominent American climate scientists, Frank Lemire of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska, and Richard Miller, Creighton University theologian. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make our case for this proposal.
Thank you, and we'll proceed to the next speaker, please.
Chairman Buffett, board members, and shareholders, my name is Michael Mann. I'm a professor at Penn State University and a climate scientist. And as a scientist who spends much of my time communicating the reality and threat of climate change, it's an honor to have this opportunity to speak to you today. Warren Buffett, known as the Wizard of Omaha, is an inspiration to many, a symbol of the value of work ethic, self-made success, and the great reward that comes with foresight. Now, foresight means recognizing both opportunity and risk. And when it comes to risk, there is no better example than climate change. I recently co-authored an article in the journal Scientific Reports, for example, demonstrating that climate change played a key role in the onslaught of unprecedented, devastating droughts, floods, and heat waves in recent years. And the impacts we're seeing now are just the veritable tip of the iceberg. Carbon emissions must be brought down dramatically within the next few years if we are to avert the worst impacts of climate change. Mr. Buffett coined the term Noah's Law in his 2015 shareholder letter to describe the risk posed by climate change, stating, "If there is only a 1% chance the planet is heading toward a truly major disaster and delay means passing a point of no return, inaction now is foolhardy." Well, I couldn't agree more. And the science tells us that we are heading toward disaster in the absence of substantial reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Board member Bill Gates demonstrated bold leadership a year ago when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation announced it was divesting of fossil fuel holdings. Were Mr. Buffett to follow suit, it would send a profound message to the rest of the global business community, a message that we can both mitigate risk and seize opportunity in the form of massive growth in clean energy technology by tackling this problem now head on before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe that there's another speaker, or maybe two. You'll identify yourself, please.
My name is Richard Somerville. I'm a climate scientist and a professor at the University of California, San Diego. Chairman Buffett, board, and shareholders, the world is warming. It is due to human activities. It is getting worse. The observational evidence is overwhelming. All the warmest years globally are recent years. We see the weather changing. We see more severe floods and droughts. Sea level rise is accelerating. Ice sheets and glaciers are shrinking worldwide. Climate change will become more and more serious unless emissions of heat-trapping gases and particles are quickly and drastically reduced. The biggest unknown about future climate is human behavior. Everything depends on what humanity does now. We have our hands on the thermostat that controls the climate of our children and grandchildren. In 2015, the nations of the world agreed in Paris on how much warming can safely be allowed. The Paris target was informed by science, and the science shows that to meet the target, emissions need to be reduced drastically and quickly. We cannot just muddle through. Dithering and procrastinating lead to catastrophe. Alleviating the disruption of climate change is cheap compared to coping with the damage that unmitigated climate change will cause. Want an example? Doing nothing about climate change means that sea level will become so high that coastal cities must eventually be abandoned. We caused this problem, we can solve it. And polls show that most Americans want strong actions to limit climate change. The forces driving clean energy are powerful. The market is turning against fossil fuels. The prices of solar and wind energy are dropping. They can already compete without subsidies. Vehicle electrification is happening fast. Clean energy provides jobs and economic growth. Progress and prosperity do not require emitting heat-trapping gases. Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett are rightly admired and respected worldwide. Helping the world confront climate change should be an important part of their legacy. We owe it to our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe there's one more speaker.
Thank you, sir. I am David Titley, retired Rear Admiral, former oceanographer of the Navy, and now a professor of practice at Penn State. I've been a shareholder of Berkshire Hathaway since December 2000. Thank you, sir, for your leadership of this enterprise. When I was stationed at the Pentagon, I had the privilege of working directly for the Pentagon's foremost strategic planner, Mr. Andrew Marshall. He taught me how to think about risk, and especially risks that may seem distant or low probability, but one with very high impacts, such as weapons of mass destruction. Climate change is a fat-tailed, emerging risk. It's really a risk to people, to us. And when this risk is not managed, we have a security problem. One example would be Syria. Climate is one of the links in a long chain of events that led to the tragic outcome. Non-climate events, such as over 1 million refugees pouring into Syrian cities from the Iraq War, stressed Syrian governance. Then about a decade ago, an exceptionally intense drought and heat spell, linked with high confidence to a changing climate, devastated Syrian agriculture. Now you have millions of desperate people with nothing and a breeding ground for extremists. Syria is an example of why in the security community we say that climate change accelerates the risks of instability. It can make bad places worse, a lot worse. Senior military officers know you must address risks and take precautions while you can, before it's too late. The U.S. Defense Department understands the risks of climate change and has been working quietly to adapt to the changing climate for years. Winston Churchill is alleged to have said Americans can always be counted upon to do the right thing after exhausting every other possibility. But we will prevail, and you, sir, can help. Here's my ask. What are government and business leaders doing to stabilize the climate? We should reduce, rather than accept, the risks of unchecked climate change. Because the ice doesn't care which party controls the White House or the Congress, it just melts. Thank you.
I am Frank Lemire, the Bear Clan of the Winnebago tribe of Nebraska. It was the indigenous people of this continent who first consecrated the ground on which we live and grow, who offered up prayers and petitions asking that we be allowed to live and to provide a way for the generations to come. In exchange for the blessings given by the Creator, our forebears agreed to be good stewards of the land. The stewardship of our Mother Earth, who provides for us, has now changed, but the covenant remains the same. Let there be no mistake about that. If we continue to disrespect our Earth Mother, those things given us, bountiful harvests, protection for the elements, and good clean water, will surely be taken from us. Our elders speak of this. It has been foretold. On Christmas Eve, my son came from Standing Rock to visit us for 1 hour. His mother and I worried about him. How is it there? Why did you go? I asked. He said, it is dangerous, Dad, but someone has to protect our water. I nodded and said, aho, that is good. He is a water protector. I stand on his shoulders. Many Wichoni, the protectors, proclaim water is life. Bearing that in mind, I am told that this waterway flowing south from Standing Rock and passing just a short walk from here would be fouled by any kind of breach in the Dakota Access Pipeline. My sense in my years tells me that this will happen. Millions would be poisoned. I'm further told that this collective body holds a 15% interest in an oil company that is a 25% shareholder in the Dakota Access Pipeline. I would ask that you walk away from that investment. Stand with Mother Earth today. I'm a Winnebago Indian. The Missouri River brought us here when we had no place to go. We stand with our Mother Earth now as she stood with us. Think about that. Mini Wichoni, water is life. Pinagigi, thank you.
Thank you.
Dear Chairman Buffett, board members, and shareholders, I'm Richard Miller. I'm an associate professor of philosophical theology and sustainability studies at Creighton University. I write and teach on ethical issues raised by the climate crisis. As a rationale for voting no on the divestment resolution, the board maintained that Berkshire should not limit its universe of potential investments based upon complex social and moral issues, and that following state and federal laws was sufficient to meet your obligations. There is not only an overwhelming consensus in the scientific community about the reality and dangers of climate change, but there is also an overwhelming consensus among all major ethical theories that one is not morally justified to use increased profit as a rationale for doing harm to others. By continuing to invest in and thus promote the extracting, processing, and burning of fossil fuels, Berkshire is doing harm to people around the world and creating conditions that will threaten future generations. While one is not morally justified to use increased profits as a rationale for doing harm to others, one cannot also opt out of ethical considerations by appealing to moral complexity. When you're doing harm to others, especially at this scale, there is no neutral space. Nor can you simply appeal to the fact that Berkshire is following state and federal laws. when those laws are themselves unethical and that they allow the United States